Yay! Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Josephine from Fina Reads. And as you can see, I'm not alone today. I have a guest with me today, and I'm super excited about that. Before we go anywhere, Sean, like as a guest, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? Who are you even?
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm a fan of the channel. As you know, we've known each other a while now, and actually, I think we first got to know each other because my partner's German, so we had that in common. And then I was talking to you about how I couldn't pronounce milk with the ch noise. So we have a really odd start to our relationship where I think you were helping me with my German pronunciation. Yeah, fan of the channel. I wrote a book recently. I'm an indie author. My name's Sean Bobby Kerr, and the book is A Journey Thrice Begun. And I'm lucky to count you as one of my few readers.
So just so we all know what the book looks like that we are going to talk about today. And by the way, no worries. We are not going to switch to German throughout the interview and all of a sudden talk in a different language, although that would be funny. Well, Sean, thanks so much for joining, for taking the time. I really appreciate you being here and you talking to me. This is still crazy to me, but I'm excited. And well, first of all, I think there are huge congrats in order for you because you just posted on your Instagram that you sold your 100th book and it's out what now? 3.5 months? That's it, right? Like 100 books in less than 4 months. That is crazy. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's God, it feels like it's been out forever, but it's yeah, only 3.5 months, and yeah, it all flew by. But to get to 100 readers, it was an absolute dream come true. So no, it really means a lot. Thank you, Josephine.
You're welcome. And we will talk a little bit about how you did that because I know as an indie author, selling 100 books that fast is not necessarily a common situation. So I definitely want to talk with you about that, on how you approached your launch, how you got to 100 books sold. Maybe at this point we're already at 200. We will see. But I would love to talk about the book first. Tell us a little bit about A Journey Thrice Begun. Give us like a short, spoiler-free summary on your book.
Yeah, the elevator pitch. Well, this story starts with Everett Dwyer. It's a very character-centered story, and obviously it starts with him. And he has one very simple dream. It's to stay in his hometown of Delwood and marry his childhood sweetheart, Isolde. And yeah, along the way, lots of things happen, lots of things complicate that. And the first major complication, which is sort of a bit of a reversal of a typical fantasy trope that I happen to love, is the magic school trope, whereby in this story, while Everett's really nervously preparing to propose on a stage in front of the entire town, he's visited by a magical sage who asks him to attend a magical university, gives him his invite that for most people, I guess this would be an absolute dream. For me, this would be an absolute dream. I'm sure you too, Josephine. But for Everett, it's not what he wants. He's focused on proposing. He doesn't want to leave Delwood to go to some magical school at the other end of the world. He just wants to marry Isolde. And I think from there, the character and the story takes a different turn to most fantasy books. And how I like to think of Everett is he's almost a reverse Harry Potter, in that, yeah, Harry really wanted to go to magical school. He wanted to leave the Dursleys. He wanted to leave Private Drive. And Everett's very much the opposite. There's magic in the story, but it's not in the way that you'd originally expect. It's not in a school environment. It really tests the bounds and the question of, if you didn't have an old hermit teaching you magic like we see in a lot of stories, what magic would you teach yourself? And I think those decisions, like would you train to learn fire first or water, those actually reveal character. And that's what you'll get in A Journey Thrice Begun, is as the magic systems developed, as you explore this world, all of those things allow you to find out more about Everett, more about who he is, and what is happening in this world for it to become increasingly dark all around him.
And that's so the part about the school in particular, I find very interesting because, as you said yourself, right? All of us, if someone would ask us, like, hey, do you want to attend this magical school? We would all scream and be like, yes, when can I go? Like, sign me up. And the fact that you completely turned that on its head and said, no, he doesn't want to go. Like, I love that. And I love because it gives us who didn't receive the Hogwarts letter yet, gives us hope because there might be other ways on becoming a magician, becoming a sage. So that is very exciting. exciting. The characters in particular in your book,
Yeah.
I think is something very unique. Not just Everett with the hey, I just want to live my life and don't want to deal with adventure, but a lot of your characters have very unique elements. Like his best friend, like he's all over the place, right? He's traveling, he is like very action oriented and he jumps around, is always excited. You have like the lovely father who just also wants to kind of stay hidden away, and you have a lot of other characters with very unique traits. So how did you, and that goes a little bit more to the writing question, I guess, like how did you keep them all straight? Because it's not just one or two characters. You have a large cast of characters in your book. How did you keep them all straight? Like how did you go about that?
Yeah, I think with managing a cast of characters and to keep them all straight and to make sure, most importantly, that they all don't just start to sound as one, is you need to find out to the core what makes a person unique. And, we've got like 7 billion people on this planet right now. Like every single one of us at our core is fundamentally unique. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So if there's 7 billion people who are entirely unique, then it's going to feel really unrealistic if in a book of a cast of maybe 100 characters, they all don't feel unique. And I think it's just a built-up skill that the more you have to do it, the better you get at it. And I was a bit lucky in that before I started writing fantasy, I was a criminal defense lawyer. And, to earn your stripes as a criminal defense lawyer, you start out in what's called legal aid, where you'll be the defense lawyer at the court for every single person who can't afford a lawyer. And so some days you are representing 100 people. Like you're running 40 bail applications, 40 sentences, maybe 20 quick run-around trials where you might be identifying a few elements of an offense to try to disprove. And the thing you need to remember with all those 100 people is their story. And you need to be able to lock that in the back of your mind. So when the magistrate or judge is saying, why shouldn't I send this person to prison if they've pled guilty? You can honestly give an accurate summary of who they are, why they might deserve a second chance. And you can't do that as a defense lawyer if you see all of them as the same person or just a name on a piece of paper. And I guess the skill comes in is that you only have about 5 minutes to get to know this person. So you're in these cells below the court. They're like these mini dungeons in some of the country towns, probably similar to a scene in my first book. And you go down, you'd have 5 minutes with someone to find out, like I said before, what makes them unique, who they are, what differentiates them from the other 99 people you might have to represent today, over the next week if I was doing a week stint in a country town in Australia. And that, when I started, I was terrible at it. I was basically providing the same submissions for every single person, but then the more you do it, the more you start to understand how to get to the core of someone, to understand like who they are at a deeper level. And it's when you reach that deeper level that it's very easy to make sure they maintain their voice. So when I write with my characters, when I'm switching dialogue between maybe Pinchas and Everett, when I go to Pinchas, I get myself in his shoes at that deep level, so that his dialogue feels like him, rather than him and Everett's dialogue maybe merging into two 18-year-olds that you just meet on the street corner. It's keeping them unique. And I got very lucky having experience before writing, but for any writers maybe watching this, I just say just keep at it. The more characters you write, the more
Yeah.
unique they'll feel, in my opinion.
And did you use any, like, when you build out the characters and their unique quirks and all the amazing things that make your characters, like, did you use any inspiration from your job or from your private life to build them out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all characters are an amalgamation of sorts of the people you know in your real life. So when you start writing, you're always going to wonder where the character's going to come from, and characters
Yeah.
are by far the most important part of a book. If you can't have great characters, people aren't going to care about plot. But then you find that the people you've met in your life, their traits will start to merge with other people's traits. So I've often heard of writers combining fictional characters too. Like, you've got, I think Matthew Bird once talked about combining Robert De Niro with his best friend to create a character, which I've never used a celebrity to create a character. Usually mine are based off people I've known, maybe as a defense solicitor, but often friends. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to tell your friends which characters are based off them. That's something I learned early on, because then when they read them, they'll be like, that's totally not me, because you never see yourself how the world sees you. So I've
Yeah.
stopped telling my friends like if parts of them are within my characters. But yeah, I think it's the more people you know, the better chance you have of writing characters that feel different.
Yeah. And I want to ask, like, if you're looking for reasons to read this book, I'm a very character-driven reader, which is why I love books so much, because you put so much love in each character, not the main one, not just the main character, but like in the side characters. Like, there's a little scene at the very beginning where a tourist is visiting the town and she fell asleep, I believe, somewhere on the side of the road, and she was covered in goose poop. Was it that? And it's like these little details in the book. There's put so much love into it. I compare it a little bit with like, I used to play World of Warcraft a long time ago, and I was never one of those big players that went, like, gathered all the things and went into all the big adventures. I was someone who sat on the side of the road and observed what was happening, because the developers put so much love into all the little details of the game that you could sit on the side of the road and watch, like, I don't know, a deer passing by and doing certain things. And the longer you sat and watched, like, there was a little movie playing in front of
Yeah.
you. And your book reminded me very much of that. Like, you put so much love into every single character, not just your main character or the main characters, like every single one, no matter if they had half a page time or the entire book. I'm hitting my lamp here already because I'm flying around with my arms. But even like little scenes, every little aspect of the book, there's a lot of, yeah, detail and love in which makes this book so unique, I guess. So just wanted to shout that out as if someone wants to pick that book up and wants yet another reason for doing so. And while I'm talking about that, so one of the aspects of the game that I'm sure you put also a lot of love in is there's a game that plays a very important part in the book called Tack. Um,
Mhm.
how did you come up with that? Because it is very detailed. You describe it in a lot of detail in the book. You describe certain maneuvers on how the game stones have to be moved and what turns you can take and all that kind of stuff. Like, how did you come up with that? Did you build the game yourself? Is there a game out there called Tack that we could buy and play? Like, where did you come up with that?
Yeah, it's funny. So the game, yeah, I created all the fundamentals. Like, you could play it. It'd take a while because there's more pieces than chess, more unique pieces than chess. So yeah, you could play it. It'd take some time to get advanced. Like, I've had some practice games with people, and it's difficult. I really do think you'd have to commit years to becoming good at it. But it was really funny. I was almost going to put a joke at the end of my book because I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to actually release this game? I was going to put a thing like, oh, if this book sells 100 copies or something like because 100 copies at the start felt like it was just never going to happen.
Well,
Especially
it
as an indie
happened
author.
3.5
So I was going to put
months
something.
in.
I got kind of lucky that I didn't put this, because I was going to put, if this book sells 100 copies, I'll release the game Attacked, which would have taken up a hell of a lot of time for me to do. But yeah, so you can play it. It's super difficult as it feels in the book. But how I created it was, I wanted a grounding for the magic system, and I think a lot of the time we enjoy what we're familiar with. And sometimes, because I like to think that this book could be read by a non-fantasy fan and a fantasy fan, is sometimes if a magic system comes out of nowhere, it's hard to buy into. Where if you have something familiar, like this tact game, this board game you're already familiar with by the time the magic system comes around. And the magic system is linked to the board game. You don't know that at first, but it is. The magic system's easier to buy into because it feels familiar, because you've already bought into the board game. It's not just saying, oh, these like, you eat these flowers and you get superpowers. It's a little bit a little easier to buy into. It almost seems to make sense. And I thought, what makes sense? Like, what is everyone familiar with? Everyone's familiar with a game like chess. So I created a game like chess that I thought would be more difficult to master. I mean, chess is very easy to play as a beginner. And I thought it'd be really fun to create a board game where, just to be a beginner, you almost had to study the game for a year or two to get your head around it. And then once you had the fundamentals after that year or two, then it could just be incredibly fun because of the complexity thereafter.
Mhm.
And yeah, so chess was a big part of the inspiration, but it would be equal parts chess, but also having the idea that this was always going to be the foundation of the magic system. So getting people to buy into the board game so that afterwards they can more easily buy into the fact that there's magic in this world. And
Yeah.
that's how I went about it.
Awesome. So how did your book journey start? Like, you just said a little bit like you wanted the game to be like the trigger for your magic system. Was that kind of how everything started, that you sat there one day and was like, I wonder? Or how did the book come about? Where did the inspiration come from? How did it get started?
The original, it's funny. I've said this to quite a few people now, and it is just the most ridiculous reason, but I feel like I almost have to own up to it. Is like, two of my favorite books, Name the Wind and Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. And I'd been waiting for the third book for so long that I eventually
Please
just got to the
don't be
point
like
as like,
Patrick, by the way. Just sorry to interrupt you. Please don't be like Patrick Rothfuss. We want to have the third book sooner.
No, yeah, well, be ironic if I was, because his delay in writing the third book is such a motivating factor for me to write my first, because that was it. I eventually asked the question, well, could I just write my own fantasy book? And that, yeah, it was that was definitely an impetus for me, was like waiting for his third book for so long. I was like, well, what is stopping me writing a fantasy book? It's been a childhood dream of mine forever. I just turned 30, and maybe you had that moment where you're like, well, it's kind of now or never. And then there was the idea of, I'd always had it, whereby I have a very good friend, Ryan, one of my best mates, and he'd left school at 16 and went and become a carpenter. And he just happens to be the smartest person I know. And because of all the stigma associated with leaving school, me and my friends really thought it was a pretty crazy decision of him. And he's obviously, we're wrong. He ended up doing tremendously well. He's so happy with his life and his job and the family he has. And I couldn't be more proud of him. And I realized with knowing Ryan and him being very close to me, that if there's people in this world that don't want to go to university or school, didn't like school, didn't like university, didn't like the idea of university, then a magical world, it would follow that there would be people that wouldn't want to go to a magical school or magical university. And I thought that had never been explored in the fantasy world. So it was the combination of two ideas, where I wanted to write a book to show up Patrick Rothfuss, and I wanted to have a protagonist who answered the question of, what if the person didn't want to go to a magical school? Like, how would a magical adventure story unwrap from there?
Yeah.
Would it affect the structure of a story? Would it affect the outcome of the story? Where would you get the rich level of plot you need if they chose not to go to a magical school? And the answer was A Journey Thrice Begun. And I never really looked back from there. One thing led to another, and started with character, like I mentioned before, then the plot came after. But it really happened a bit in a piecemeal fashion, so to say.
That is interesting. I find it also, the way you're describing that, I mean, once you read the book, it's very obvious, but the way you're describing that makes it really sounds like the reluctant hero trope done very differently in that sense. So it's a very interesting approach. I still can't get over the fact that he said no, by the way. Like, that's still please, Owl, come now. I will say yes, I promise.
Yeah.
I will not be like Everett.
Yeah. Well, that was what made it so fun to write for me as well. It was really fun writing a character, like a protagonist, who was the exact opposite of me. Because like you, I waited around for my Hogwarts letter my whole life. I'm still waiting. And him saying no, he really was the opposite. He was so different to me that I found the scenes he was in more interesting to write than if I'd written a protagonist, which I think a lot of authors do for their first time around, who is just basically you. So I guess that was challenging, but made the experience, like, I loved every second writing that book. And I don't think a lot of authors could say that. And I think one of the reasons was that I could never predict what Everett was going to do or his decisions he was going to make. So I got very, very lucky there with the protagonist.
I find it fascinating. Like, I've watched a lot of Arthur interviews, and you're doing the same thing. Like, that the character came to life for you, which they do on the pages, right? But the way you're describing that, I love that you're saying I got lucky with my character, that he behaved on the page. I find this such a nice visual to say, like, hey, this is kind of my baby, really, that came to life and that did kind of what I wanted it to do. But it was not me writing it. It was me just observing him. And then he did something on the page, and it happened to be something really cool. I love the way that this is described, that you're describing your character too. I can also imagine, like, writing a character that is the complete opposite of you, that it is somewhat cathartic to write a character like that, to on purpose be like, hey, this is not me. What would I not do? Or what would I do? And what is then the opposite of that in a situation like that? And have that experience. And yeah, it sounds a very interesting writing experience too.
Yeah, it couldn't have been more interesting. You're absolutely right. I think that we're always looking for characters that surprise the author, to surprise us, because if they're surprising us, there's a really good chance they're surprising the reader. It's not going to be a guarantee, but if you're not surprising the reader, it's going to be a pretty boring read. So every time he surprised me within that story, it was one of those moments I was like, yeah, licking my chops. I was like, great, this is going to be a great reading experience, because you know what? It's different. And one of the common reviews I've had for this book so far, like good, bad, or in between, is it's a very different fantasy read. And that really made me excited, was to do something so different, so out of the box. And so every time Everett, like, you try send him down a lane that's maybe more prototypical of fantasy, he'd walk down a completely different road. And instead of being like, why won't you behave? Why won't you do what the plot outline suggested you to do? I just got super excited. I was like, yes, Everett, let's go. Where are you going to go now? What decisions are you going to make? And it was great because all the decisions he made had, in my opinion, real consequence. And obviously there's some really dark parts to the book.
No kidding.
starts out a lot more whimsical, but just to warn future readers, as you well know, it becomes very dark because the decisions he makes have real life consequences. As upbeat and optimistic as he was when he made the decisions, you can almost see the other side of the scale as like how dark and disturbing the results were that came from those. So yeah, it was a very exciting character to write, and I'm just buzzing because I got another 2 books to write with him and the other cast of characters. So it's not over. Before I picked up this interview, I'm about halfway into book 2 now, and yeah, I'm very lucky because I'm still enjoying writing him and the other cast of characters. So yeah, hopefully that doesn't go away.
Oh, I'm sure it won't. Now that you're mentioning book 2, so what is your plan currently? Because book 1 is out for 3.5 months now, very successfully. What's your plan for book 2, and do you have a plan for book 3 already?
Yeah, so book 2 will be out to beta readers by the end of the year, and then released early next, and then it'll be a year after that, book 3. So my goal is to write the book 1 a year. I think it's a reasonable time frame for me. I'm not going to be a James Patterson where I'm writing 4 books a year. I actually honestly don't understand how writers can do that. Maybe they're just way smarter than me. But I said for me, a book a year was a reasonable expectation. I'm not going to ever do more than that because it's something you pointed out before that I've never really seen in my own writing is I do like to pay a lot of attention to the things that are off screen, the things that are behind the curtain. And I personally can't give that level of detail to the reader to promise them that there is so much more happening behind the curtain that they're not seeing for them to make the world feel real. If I'm writing more than a book a year. So I'd say, yeah, book 3 be about 2 years away, and book 1 will be the end of this year. Book 2 will be the end of this year, rather.
Yes. That is, I mean, how fast the time goes, that is very soon. So I'm excited about that one. Because you ended a little bit on a cliffhanger. So, we want to know how it continues, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, I'm hoping the
obviously,
answers live up to the questions as well.
yes, and we're not going to spoil anything. But one other thing that I want to point out about the book that I think is also very cool is you have a map in your book, and I'm holding that up here a little bit in the window. So that is page 1 in the window. Yeah, of course, in the camera. Well, there's a window there too, but I love this map. It has this hand-drawn quality to it, which I assume it is. But can you tell us a little bit about the map, how you started this, how you approached this, who painted this map? Yeah.
Yeah. So the story of that map is I spent way too long world building, and every fantasy author, in my opinion, loves world building. And when we start a new book or a new trilogy, we're always doing too much. So actually, before I started book 1, I'd done a whole year of just world building. And one of the things I really enjoyed was creating a world that felt real from a geographical point of view. And that came from a great study of like just even the intricacies of like where would a lake fall on which side of a mountain range, like those fundamental questions to make the world feel real from a very superficial 2D perspective. And so I basically learned about cartography, and that was a real joy for me. And that was part of the world building. And I took it as far as I could possibly take it. But as my year 11 art teacher would have said, I had no chance of making it look any good. So she probably ruined my confidence, actually, that teacher. So I got to the point where the detail was there. It looked hideous. And now, in my opinion, it looks absolutely beautiful. And that's because of Tiffany Munro. So she's the cartologist who took it over for me. And she was fantastic. Shout out Tiffany if you have. I'll have to send this to Tiffany. So shout out you, Tiffany. She did a like a stellar job. I can't imagine ever using another cartologist in the future. But her story with the map was there was some things that were wrong with it. As much as I studied cartography, there was certain things to the setup of the world that weren't realistic. That's just not how, say, where a mountain range would lie, where a lake would lie, where there would be desert, where there would be forest. So she changed a few things, and I was very fortunate that those didn't affect the storyline.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be realistic, the map. I wanted it to feel like a real world, and Tiffany added a lot to that. And yeah, and then the last thing I said was one thing I wanted to correct in my book was the Northern Hemisphere bias. And you probably won't know what I'm talking about, but for us Southern Hemisphere folk, us Aussies, in particular, and you got the Kiwis as well, and these are just the people I've talked to, because you got all of South America as well. But when we read books, it's always when you go north it gets colder, and that doesn't feel right for us. So
Yeah.
and it always it's you probably would never think about it, but us Southern Hemisphere folk are always like, oh, what, that doesn't feel right at all. So one of my little things was have it get colder as you go south, and more dangerous as you go south. And I said to her, I said to Tiffany, can you please make that apparent in the compass? And then you see in the compass she did, which it took her a long time to do. She had the north, east, south, west, but on the south, if you could see, there's it's inlaid with a cool little skull, and I really enjoyed that. I don't know if we're going to be able to see it. Yeah, that to me was one of the coolest things she did. It was so much attention to detail, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly didn't do that. Yeah, so that's the map story. So Northern Hemisphere bias, it's a real thing.
Oh, I believe that immediately, that is a thing. Yeah. I love this. I love that, like, the theme of attention to detail really runs through the entire book, not just your story, not just the character development, not just the world building, but it fits into the map. I'm sure you have a similar story for the cover, who is also which is also beautiful. I'm pulling it up again. Ugh, wrong direction. Um, like, has that same hand-drawn quality and a lot of detail too, if you look closely into the little aspects of the frame and whatnot, and the lantern and everything. um, so let's talk a little bit about the writing aspect when we talk about a lot of detail, right? There's a reason that you sold 100 copies so fast. So other than being very oriented, like, what's your secret? How did you get there? How did you achieve that amazing result?
I don't know how much of it was down to the writing. I think the first thing you need to do before the writing is get it into people's hands. So I'm certainly not going to say the book's better than other indie books, because sadly the thing I noticed, and what I'd love to shine some light on, is there's so many amazing indie authors out there whose books just don't get seen, whose writing would no doubt be better than mine. They're more talented than me, but they get stuck into that big group of people who I know you mentioned before, the average indie author doesn't sell more than a dozen copies, who just aren't discovered. And I think I got quite lucky in that I've always liked to stay close to the fantasy community. Like yourself, I'm always involved. I'm always trying to chip in and be parts of book clubs. And, it's basically giving as much back to the fantasy community as you can. And when my book came out, I had such great relationships in this community. Relationships that some of them just came out of the fact that someone had posted a review about the book. I thought it was a fantastic review, and you know what? Messaged them saying, like, hey, I so agreed with your assessment of that story. And then one thing leads to another. Then you're on the phone to them, and you're raving about the book to each other. Sometimes I've actually seen reviews I just entirely disagreed with. I was like, I'd love to pick your brains on how you got to giving this book 2 stars. Like I had someone I reached out to, well, this sounded quite confrontational. They gave 2 stars to Babel. It's a book that I absolutely adore, Babel. And I messaged him. I was like, "Oh, how'd you get to the 2-star review? I really thought this was a great book." And we ended up catching up for a really great phone call. I won't name drop anyone, but you know who you are. And one thing led to another, and we're still in touch to this day. And we just agree on so many reviews. But I have that connection, and they were one of my early readers, funnily enough. And you know, I thought, God, if they gave Babel 2 stars, like mine's going to be a half a star at best. But it ended up okay. And yeah, I think that a lot of indie authors don't get their books read because they're not involved in the community. You know, our relationship, as I said, started with you helping me with my German pronunciation. I love your reviews of books. They're so unique, Josephine. You have a different take on every book you ever review, different to anyone.
I don't know. That's a good thing.
I love that about your review. Yeah, no, but a good thing or not, I think it's a good thing. But good thing or not, it's true. I think we both know that. And so, I mean, you're another reader because I was connected with you. So I wouldn't say it's the writing that got me to 100 reviews. I really guarantee it isn't actually. It's the fact that I'm involved in the fantasy community. And it's never, in my opinion, been about me. Like I have a friend, Tori, who's a booktuber. And really early on, she said, look, I'm editing my books all the time now. I can't stand looking at like indie authors' books right now because all I see, and this is totally fair enough, is the criticisms because she's in editing mode. And, you know, like I can imagine a lot of other people who are just me. Oh, she's not going to read my book. I'll leave it by the wayside. That wasn't the case. Like I still have a friendship with Tori to this day. I know she's never going to read my book. Maybe when the trilogy's done, she might. But there's no short-term gain to that relationship. But I think Tori's fantastic. I think everyone on BookTube loves her for a reason. And we've had really long phone calls where she's just given me amazing advice on writing because I think she wrote her first fantasy book at 14, for instance. Like she's an absolute prodigy of a writer. And she was telling me about all that. And I really doubt she'll read my book, but these are the sort of things you have to do in the community because you want to. You want to be a part of the fantasy community so that you don't feel like a bit of a dick when you just say, hey, can you read my book? You've actually got a relationship, and then they choose to pick up your book. I think Michael Cronk did a video the other day where he said about my book that he had to ask me about it. We've been friends for quite some time. He discovered himself that I had a book out, and he picked it up. So for all those indie authors, we've got the best community here. We've got such an amazing community of people. This fantasy community is so full of love and support. And if you just become a part of that community, add value to it, and share the love, like people will pick up your book and read it. You'll get more than a dozen readers, and I guarantee your book's going to be better than mine in a lot of times. So I'm sure you guys get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 readers if I can get 100. So yeah, I wouldn't want to talk about the writing, but it's all about the community to keep it short.
Yeah, that is very true, especially in the indie world. And by the way, your writing is fantastic. So please don't put yourself short on that part. Like the writing is a big part of what makes your book special. And I know that, but I'm sure that a lot of reviewers put out a review because they see the gem that is your book and they see the uniqueness that is your book and want others to know, right? Like even as a reviewer, I feel there's a balance between I like it was a decent book, it was a good book, was it something special? Maybe not, but if it is something special, if you find that unique book as a reviewer, you are shouting it from the rooftop. Like you're putting a review out, you're mentioning it in your whatever reviews, whatever you're doing. At least that's for me what I'm doing, right? If I like something, I don't shut up about it. So you're absolutely right. It's important to be part of the community, right? And that's the first step to get your foot in the door. And then if you created a world like yours that is so chock full of unique stuff that you don't see in other fantasy books, that really make it stand out in that fantasy crowd, like that's just, that just then helps more so to get the book out. So I think the writing is was very important in your case too, and it was very helpful that you are a good writer. So
that that really means a lot. And I just add something Ryan Carhill taught me was, as an indie author, you never. I mean, it's almost impossible to get a lot of book sales. So you don't want to set your expectations too high as well. So one thing I definitely encourage others to do if they want to get out of those group of people who don't sell more than a dozen books is integrate yourself into the community, but make sure you're writing something that you'd be willing to write for one person. And as cliche and corny as this sounds, if you were my only reader, Josephine, I would be so happy to continue spending all my weekend writing books 2 and 3 because it's this story I love to write, and it's a story I believe in. It's a story I believe ought to be told, and it's different, and it's you want to make sure you're writing something you're gonna have a thrill getting up at all sorts of early hours of the weekend to do. And you got to manage your expectations in that. You might only get 100 readers for your book, but it's not about the numbers. It's about the joy you can bring those 100 readers. And like you said, I've got this very small group of readers, but they've been so incredibly loyal and supportive. And everyone like yourself has been shouting this book to the rooftops. And there's not very many of you, but my small group of readers could not have been more encouraging. And that's something that has been incredible for me. And look, if I don't ever get another reader, the fact I've got you guys and girls, and it really means the world that you're there to read books 2 and 3. I know you're excited, and a lot of my other readers are as well. So that would be the other thing I'd say is don't set your expectations too high, and that way you'll make sure you're writing a story that's really meaningful to you.
Yeah. And it shows. I believe if you enjoy writing the book, coming up with the character, watching them do something on the page, right? Watching them make weird decisions where you sit there like, where are you going? Well, let's see. I believe that shows. As a reader, it's just very obvious if someone enjoyed writing this book or not. Again, my opinion. I might be totally off with that, but I truly believe that. And that's why I love the indie community so much, right? That's why I love reading indie books in general,
absolutely.
because it allows you to write what you want. It allows you to just go with the flow and see what your characters are doing on the page and having fun while observing them. Whereas with these big authors that are kind of forced into a direction now, like look at George R.R. Martin, right? One of the great examples. He wrote his 5 books. Everybody has expectations now on how the story needs to go. They're all waiting for it. No matter what he writes, there will be people disappointed by it. But I can only imagine how hard that must be as an author, that you're kind of put into a corner like that, and that the joy is taking out of it, right? You're forced to write something that you might not want to write in that sense. So, but that's where indie books are so different from trade published books, because you can write about whatever you want. You can be as inclusive as you want, right? Like all of these things that make the indie book, that make indie books so unique. That's I would never want to miss it. I don't want to miss out on reading indie books ever in my life anymore. I've discovered so many great ones, so many great stories. Yeah. So keep at it. Have fun.
No,
have fun writing.
I will. Poor George R. R. Martin. He should just become an indie author. Maybe that's the problem here. Is release the last book indie, just upload it as like a PDF to his blog or something like that. Maybe that would take all the pressure off. The most indie you could possibly do. A PDF where everything's like not even spaced out, just one big pile of words, no paragraphs.
Or a web series of some sort.
No editing. Yeah. Sounds so authentic. I like it. Yeah. I'll definitely pitch this to GRIM if I ever run into him. Go indie.
Yeah, just do it. All right. Now we talked about your book. We talked about you as an author. Tell us a little bit about you yourself. So we already know you live in Australia. We already know it's warm where you're right now, not cold.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you don't write or read?
So if I'm not writing or reading, I stay pretty active. It's so I'm living on the northern beaches of Sydney, and I just, it's such a nice place to live. So I've kind of lived around the world. I've lived in Lyon, Paris, and Oxford. And one of the things that I noticed specifically under those 5 years in Manchester was I spent so much time indoors because it was raining and miserable and cold. So having spent most of my 20s outside Australia, now that I'm back, I really appreciate now the outdoor lifestyle. So I'll be surfing, snorkeling. I'll play a lot of tennis as well. My partner still thrashes me. Carrie's a great tennis player. So we're very competitive against each other. We still walk home holding hands, but like only just when we finish tennis. But yeah, it's look, I also got to say, like, I love the outdoor lifestyle. Like, a big part of me has that inclination to just cozy up inside, even if it is 40 degrees outside, and just read fantasy. I'm always reading. I'll probably get through a book or two a week, and that's always been the case. Like, I unfortunately now with getting a bit older and having done this now for 15 years, it's a lot of rereading. But I'll basically mix it up between reading and keeping active and spending time with friends and families. I think so much of getting older is realizing the importance of time with your close ones. You don't get as much time as you once did. So making every moment count. So when I catch up with my parents, like, just making sure I'm really present and enjoying their company and enjoying being in the moment. And and the same with my friends, who I've been lucky. I've had the same group of friends mine since I was in year 7. I've stayed very, very close with, and I love dearly. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty. There's nothing out there crazy I do. Probably the craziest thing I do is writing. Like, my friends used to think it was bizarre how early I'd wake up on weekends to start writing. So even if you have a hangover, I'd still be getting up early and just managing it and powering through some writing. And it was every day, and so the craziest thing I do is writing, and I think all the rest is quite just normal and ordinary.
So how often did you have situations where you were out with your friends, and then while you were listening to them, it's like, oh, I just have an idea for the book. Wait, where can I write it down? Let me not forget this. Often into situations like this.
All the time. You actually have no idea how often this happens. I remember my best mate Sam. I was a groomsman, and the groomsman, it was a surprise wedding. We're in this sort of, it was like a farm in the middle of this place called the Hunter Valley, but it was like this very Italian setup whereby they had this line of cypress trees, and that was where he walked down with his wife now, and then everyone was on the other side of these cypress trees, and they thought it was an engagement party, but it was actually a wedding. And I remember I was hiding behind a cypress tree. Like it was 40 degrees. I was in my tuxedo, like sweating absolute bullets.
Celsius, by the
And
way,
I'm watching my
for
best.
the Americans here.
Yeah, yeah.
40 degrees
So I
Celsius is
always
freaking
like,
hot in Fahrenheit. So just on the side note.
yeah. Fun fact: a great way to convert is 28 degrees Celsius is 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So just flip it, and then usually you can get pretty close around that. But it was maybe 105 Fahrenheit.
It is freaking hot.
That's just a guess. And yeah, and he's walking down the aisle, and I had such a game-changing idea for my first book as he's walking down the aisle. And it wasn't one of those ideas where they seem really great at the time, and then you actually, in 2 weeks, you're like, well, actually, in hindsight, that's a terrible idea. It is actually a fundamental part to book one that I can't say is because it's a spoiler. And book one wouldn't have worked without this idea. And I'm just all I was thinking about as my best friends walking down like the aisle was this idea for the book. And it sounds horrible, but that's kind of the life you live. And I've had that in every career I've had. Maybe I'm just a very obsessed person, but when I was a criminal defense solicitor, I'd have clients pleading not guilty, and then I'd have the bundle of evidence that would just, without a doubt, show that they were guilty. And then I'd be at like a house party or something, or some sort of event or gathering, and I just realized the argument I could make to the court that would establish a reasonable doubt as to my client's guilt. And I'd be like, oh, wow. And then you look so rude because people are looking at you, and maybe your eyes are glazed and they're like, hey, is anyone there? That's, yeah, I think that's, I'm hoping it's not just me. Surely other writers have this as well. But yeah, it's crazy where you get your best writing ideas. You never know when they're going to come. Inconvenient, but entertaining.
Yeah. I think that's with every creative job. So, I mean, my main job is in marketing, and I never get a good idea if I just sit there in my 8 hours and be like, okay, now I have to come up with an idea for the next big campaign. Never. Like, it happens when I'm on the walk or somewhere completely different. And always, when I don't have something that I can write with really fast, or I'm trying to stumble with the notes on my phone and I'm not a very fast typer, always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating how
Yeah,
that
no,
works.
I hear you.
All right.
It is frustrating, but I'm happy I'm not alone with them.
I think no matter what creative job you're in, if it's about like coming up with something creative in one way or another, I think we all have been through that at one point or another. So, it wouldn't be fun otherwise. Like, it would be too easy, right? If you could just sit down and like, be creative now, please.
Great.
Thank you. So what are you reading right now? Very important question, of course, that I haven't even asked yet. Oh my goodness.
Okay, I've just finished the Rhythmatist. Basically, yeah, 2 days ago. I haven't picked up a new book yet. It was really, so the Rhythmatist is probably a lesser known book by Brandon Sanderson that I'd been meaning to pick up for years because I've worked my way through his entire catalog, so I am down to those more unknown books. But it's really crushing because I quite liked the ending. It ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and then he's never written the second book. So he wrote the first in 2014 with this obvious cliffhanger. And it was really funny. I was reading the reviews on Goodreads, and the top review with the most likes was someone had just commented, my life dream was to read the second Rhythmatist book. And you've really ruined that for me, Brandon Sanderson. I just couldn't crack up more. It was really funny. And yeah, I kind of felt, I liked that comment. And I've only waited 2 days for book two. This guy's been waiting, 11 years. I think we've all experienced that with some authors. I wouldn't have thought to experience that with Brandon Sanderson though. Like I didn't realize he kept people waiting on it. But it was a really fun book, and I think I don't know if I'll take a break from fantasy for my next read. But my partner Caro, I think she's been recommending The Silent Patient to me for so long that if I pick up another book that's not The Silent Patient, I'm just going to be in trouble. So I might get that out of the way. And I guess the only thing I have against it is, it's not fantasy. So we'll see. We'll see.
That's okay. Well, the good thing is we have it recorded now, so I can send it over to her, and it's like, "Here, you have proof now. Let's go."
Yeah. He's committed to reading it. Yeah, no, agreed. I need to get it out of the way. Apparently, it's really good.
It's supposed to be. I haven't read
The
it
Silent
either yet, but
Patient.
it has
Like,
been on my shelves for a long time, and it's one of those tropes that, you're probably either going to love it or you don't. Like, that's what it sounds like, at least from descriptions and reviews and everything that I've heard so
yeah.
far about this book, yeah.
I'm a pretty easy reader. I enjoy most books, but yeah, I give 5 stars to so many books. To be fair, so if it's one of those things where you either like it or you won't, 99% of the time I'll fall on the like it side of the thing. So like it side of the fence. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, how does that feel? I wouldn't know.
Yeah, you and I are very different.
Which is good. I actually like
We have
that. I like
such different
talking.
views. Yeah.
Yeah, I like talking to people that have different opinions about books or saw different things in books than I did, because it makes such a much more interesting conversation about the book than I find. So, all good.
Why your reviews are so interesting for me in particular to read, because I'll go into like a Mistborn review, like we were talking about before this interview, and I'll be expecting like, oh, it's like a 5-star read, and I'm more looking for why did this person find it to be a 5-star read, and then when I read your reviews, I'll see something like 3 stars, and it's almost like a story hook where I'm like, I'm so hooked. I'm like, how did she find the first Mistborn book to be a 3-star? And then your reviews are fantastic as well. Like, you can almost convince me into anything. I'll read your reviews and be like, good point, very good point. So yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
probably why I became a fan of your page, to be fair. It was just, we're so different.
Well, good that we are a fan of each other's work, so that works for me. Thank you.
Agreed.
Awesome. So, if anyone wants to follow you, follow your journey on writing, wants to see when the next book comes out, where can they do that?
So follow me on entergyra.com. That's my main webpage. Gyra is the name of the world we saw the map of before. So entergyra.com, or potentially easier for everyone also just to follow my Instagram handle, which is just Sean Bobby Kerr.
Awesome. All right. Before we are
And then,
finishing
the
out.
last thing I should say is the book's available on all e-readers.
Yes.
But being an indie book, it isn't available in hard copy paper yet. I say yet, it's a big yet. But if I do get some more readers, potentially I will release it in paper. But it's available on all e-readers. So if you've got your Kobo, Kindle, whatever, just search the title, A Journey Thrice Begun. And if you don't have a Kobo or Kindle, just know that I'm trying my best to get a paper format out. And if I get a few more readers, maybe that'll be worth doing for sure. And same with an audiobook.
Awesome. Before we're finishing out the interview, is there anything else you want to share with us about your book, about your writing journey, anything that we have forgotten to talk about?
No, I really don't think so. I think you nailed me some great questions. I couldn't think of another thing to say. But no, thank you so much for inviting me on your channel. I knew I'd have a great time chatting, because obviously we're friends already. But no, it actually has been a lot of fun, just like I thought it would be. So yeah, thank you so much, Josephine. I really appreciate it. And as a reader of mine, I could not be more grateful that you actually gave my book a chance, and I'm happy you enjoyed it.
Yes. Well, thank you, Sean, so much for joining on the channel to talk about your book. And also, thank you for sending me the book. Like, that was, sometimes there's those lucky moments where, like, yeah, send it over. I'll get to it eventually. And then, I just had a moment of free time. I was like, you know what? I'm picking this up now, and I'm so glad I did it. It was a great journey that was started 3 times over. No,
Yeah,
highly
very true.
highly recommend it if you want to check it out. I put all the links down below in the description as well, so you can go check out and take a look at the book. Again, Sean, thanks so much for joining the channel, and then I hope the rest of you have an amazing rest of your day, and we will see you soon with another video. Thanks.